Okie doke. So I understand that you want to get better at creating urgency and closing deals.
Yes.
You feel like you've got a lot of stuff out there.
I do.
Okay, so talk to me more about that.
I just feel like I get in the crux of a deal and I find a lot of good information out, and I come back and I give what I feel like is a good feedback. But then it comes down to time to make a decision,
Okay.
and I can't bribe them. I can't. I can't. You know, it's like I you know, it's one of those things where it's like I feel like when I get to the point of closing the deal, they feel like they have to stew in it for a while. I mean, it's like, you know, they're great ideas, great decisions. This is what we want to do, but then I really can't do this for another year. And a lot of these deals end up coming back later and are like, yeah, we're ready to close now.
Okay.
So I don't know what, I mean, I'm getting my point across, I think, but I'm not making the urgency happen.
And when you're there, giving the feedback, providing the recommendation, giving the business case,
Yes.
they seem excited. It makes sense.
Yes.
And then you leave the office,
And I'm like,
and then
yes.
it just stalls.
It stalls.
It just stalls.
Yeah.
Okay. Any insight or thought as to maybe why it loses its appeal, or it's the excitement around it?
What I feel like maybe is not happening is, you know, I meet all of their needs, but I never address why it's important to do it now,
Okay.
if that makes sense. So I was talking to a couple of customers the other day, and both of them are in-house clients, I'm sorry. Both of them are in-house right now, and obviously now is the time to make a transition, and because of the ACA and
Okay.
a million other reasons. And I tell them that.
Yeah.
But it's like, you know, and maybe what I'm missing is some of the reasons why it's, I mean, so I have great reasons why, you know, I think, I come back, you know, when you're reporting wise, you're going to need to report 6 months back, so we're thinking, you know, think about that and building a structure around it, but it's never, okay, what's the true impact of not changing, or not making a change, and I don't know that that I'm doing a good job of portraying that to people.
So missing the means, like here's the consequence.
Here's what it means.
Okay.
Here's the consequences. Some of the things we talked about today with the Challenger.
So when you make decisions, purchasing decisions, think through the process that you go through in your mind and the steps that you go through as a buyer. So pick something. Pick something that that you don't have to have today.
Right.
You'd like to have today. It'd be great, but you don't need it. So like if you wanted a new car, it's not like your car is broken down and you have to replace it. You need something today. So
Well, I think that a good thing for me to think about would be like a vacation.
okay.
I need a vacation. Everybody always needs a vacation, but to justify the cost in having a vacation,
Okay.
that's
So
probably a good one for me.
walk through your steps then of making that decision one way or the other.
Okay, so I think it probably starts with just the realization that something needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, you know, as I'm thinking, these things are connecting with the companies that I'm working with. You know, sometimes it's in my head, sometimes it's in somebody else's head, and they come to me and say, hey, listen, you know, I think it's time for us to go on vacation because we're just, you know, things are crazy. We need to break from it. We need things to settle down. So, so sometimes it's that, and then the second thing would be, okay, so where are we going to go? What are we going to do?
So the first is I realize we have a need. We need to go on vacation.
Right.
The second is we need to evaluate our options then.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, same thing.
Okay.
And then as you're evaluating options, obviously you're looking at various things. So do you want to go to the mountains and breathe fresh air? Do you want to go to the beach and get a tan? Do you want to...
You're establishing criteria, right?
Correct.
Okay. Establishing
Correct.
criteria for what constitutes a good vacation.
Correct.
Okay. What else?
Then, planning piece of what will be done. Once the decision, you know, on where to go is made, the planning piece comes into effect. And from my perspective, that's when some of the cost justification comes in.
Good. Okay, so now you're saying, well, gosh, vacation on the beach in the sun sounds great. Let's start planning it. Let's look at
Right.
different locations.
Different locations, what things can be done, what things are locally around there that we could do.
Cost justification. So do we
How much
do
does
we
it cost to
fly?
make that to the beach? Yeah.
Do we fly? Do we drive?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you've evaluated options. You've narrowed it down, right?
Yes.
And so now you're establishing the criteria of what
Right.
is a good vacation.
Mhm.
Now you're at the planning and the exploring of costs.
Correct.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So now you've narrowed it down to a couple of options, right? You've got two recommendations, two things that look really great.
Yeah.
How do you make the decision?
Maybe this is where I get stuck.
Okay.
Because I think that sometimes my decision-making criteria is
This
a little
is good.
bit,
This is good.
a little bit, I don't want to say kooky, but I guess that's kind of what I'm thinking in my head in comparison. Because for me, sometimes I make the decision based upon aesthetics.
Sure.
Sometimes I would make the decision based upon, functionality, propensity, like closeness to family. Could we also go
Logistics.
kill several birds with one
Got
stone?
it.
Other times it's just, where's my mind? Do I need to just get someplace where there's nothing that I have to be accountable to? So I guess that's maybe something that personally that I go through that maybe is, it's very interesting. I don't know how that
Is
would.
cost one of those?
Cost is,
Cost,
cost
okay.
is really one of them because you kind of, and I don't know that I would go into this with having a preset budget either.
Okay. Right.
Because you don't, hey, have a vacation or hey, unless you go to the same place every year, which is not anything I would ever do.
So what's interesting to me is that the steps that you go through, and even down to like the how you make the decision, the criteria, your buyers are going through the exact same process,
I know.
right?
That's
So
true. Mhm.
when it comes to the process, whether they come to the realization that they need something or you're being the person that brings that realization to them, you're the trigger event.
Right.
From that point on, then they start evaluating their options.
Right.
And then they start establishing criteria for making their decision.
Mhm.
And then when you think about once they've established the criteria, they have to prioritize. So
Right.
just like for you, depending on the situation, and it might be different one year to the next or one vacation from the next, you have to prioritize. Is cost going to be the big determining factor because this is our second vacation this year and we only have X number of dollars in the budget to go somewhere?
Right.
Or is it we haven't taken a vacation in 5 years, budget is out the window? To me, it's going to be all about the experience this time.
Right. So, is that establishing buying criteria, or is that? I mean, because that's a bunch of things.
Yeah. So I think it definitely falls into establishing buying criteria. What else do you think it might fall into?
Well, budget is probably.
Is that a buying criteria?
I don't think so.
No? Oh,
I mean, I think
That's
I
good.
I
Okay,
shouldn't.
let's
No,
talk
I
about
shouldn't.
that.
So I shouldn't. Well, yeah. So.
well, that's good. That's a good perspective. I want to hear it.
I think that if it's the right decision, there's always ways to make it happen regardless of the cost. So maybe it's a little bit less, maybe it's a little bit more, but there's always, if we need to go to the beach, we need to go to the beach.
Yep.
So from my perspective, there's always there's a decision within a decision.
Yep.
So you can have a little bit of paradise, or you can have a lot of paradise, but then that's where the budget piece comes into play.
So you said something that I thought was really profound, and that is if it's a good business decision, I'm going to paraphrase, if it's a good business decision, you'll figure out a way in the budget to make it work, right? So
Because that's the decision within the decision.
exactly.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing you say then is, you said this is where I get stuck personally, and then I'm going to draw the parallel that this is probably where you're getting stuck in the sales process. Is that when it comes to determining the decision-making criteria,
Mm-hmm.
right, is understanding what is the decision-making criteria, and then
Probably, yeah.
if you're meeting all of those needs asking the tough budget questions.
Okay.
So that, to me, that's what I'm hearing, what you just said is kind of maybe the first stumbling block. To then, when it comes time to making the recommendation and pitching the deal, then to creating urgency is why they need to do it now.
Because then I can flip back and say, you said.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's a big one, right? I
Mhm.
think that why ADP, why now, doesn't start, that conversation does not start in the feedback proposal when you're demoing the solution.
Right.
The
That's the first one.
conversations start in the executive overview when you're first having conversations around why would you make a decision to do something differently.
Right. And then probably in the analysis is where would you agree? Like for Sturgis Molded, this analysis we're going to go back for, that's when we would help them or come to the conclusions of what. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
true. So that the doors are opened in the EO, and then really digging in and finding out what the decision-making criteria are during that. So when you're doing that, then do you just write down key things that you hear them say, or what would you say that Obviously, there's questions that you can ask, but what things should you be listening for? Because I think we've talked about this a million times, but I think that we do a really great job of asking questions, maybe not listening to the answers.
Sure.
So,
Are you talking about the questions around the actual decision-making criteria or what it means to them?
kind of both. I guess that was all that.
Yeah, well, so my personal opinion is I think it all starts in the first meeting,
Mm-hmm.
and you start when you're connecting them to ADP.
Okay.
It's about sharing with them how we're impacting organizations, but then asking the qualifying questions. Right? So if we were able to have this sort of impact on your organization,
Okay. That
would
makes
it make sense?
Mhm.
What kind of time frame then would it make sense to make a change? And asking, who's involved in that decision? What kind of criteria do you run it through to first of all even decide, is this a good business decision?
Okay. Yeah, and then so some of the criteria or the additional things we can connect the dots with will come during the analysis. So the doors open in the EO as far as connecting the dots to how ADP can help, asking the if questions, if this makes sense, what are the decision-making criteria, who's going to be involved in the decision, what would be a timeline for you, I guess, so the urgency has to come from that EO too.
Yep.
So the urgency has to be, it's that space between the if what,
Mhm.
I don't know if that makes sense, but if ADP can do this, then, am I making sense in my head?
Absolutely. I think you have to ask the if what questions. I think that's a good way to phrase it. So if we're able to do all this, does a partnership with ADP make sense to you?
Mhm.
And yes, if it does, what kind of time frame would you be in a position to make a change? Again,
Okay,
if this
what kind of
met
time? If
the
this-
criteria of a good business decision. And by the way, what does that criteria look like for you?
Right, okay. Those are easy. Those are just 3 easy, simple questions that, so if this were to make sense and this is something that you wanted to, explore looking at with ADP, then what? Okay. Yeah.
Do you think in that meeting they are going to be more open, more agreeable, or less open, less agreeable?
I think depending upon how you ask the question and how this is transitioned into, then I think they would be more agreeable.
Yeah, because I agree. Because at that point, they have nothing to risk because you haven't proven that this is a good business case for
Yeah,
me. So
right.
sure, if this is a great business case,
Right,
I think it would make a lot of sense to partner with ADP.
right.
But then as you start proving the business case, then
Right.
they kind of get that, hold on, I'm not so sure just yet, right?
Right.
So I think you still have to ask the questions, get the criteria so that you know what you're going to be benchmarked against because everything you build from there on is going to be
Mhm.
against those benchmarks.
Right.
But then I think it becomes really critical to continue to retest them for, like trial close.
Right.
Retest them for their sincerity to evaluating
Right.
the impact that
Absolutely.
ADP can have on their organization.
Validation.
Yeah, the validation. And that, comes through the analysis as well.
And the feedback, and then yes, the whole
Every
thing.
step of the way.
Yeah.
I think you hit something really big though, because at each step, I think every step of the sales process serves a really specific function for creating the urgency, right? So the EO, it's about just understanding what their decision criteria looks like, who's involved, would they make a decision, what kind of time frames. It gives you the foundation for how they're going to make the decision. The analysis gives you an opportunity to validate and test for that and to uncover everything that you need to build the business case according to the criteria, right, that they've laid out, what's important to them, what they need to see for this to be a good business decision. The analysis is going to allow you to collect that data. When you're going back and you're providing your recommendation, you're demonstrating, that gives you the opportunity to show you how we're going to accomplish what they said was important to accomplish and what that's going to mean to your organization. And I think that's key, because that's one of the things that you said very early on that you think is missing when you're giving that feedback demo, is that you're not truly connecting it back to, yeah, it's going to solve a problem, but this is what it means to your organization.
Yeah, and truly the most successful sales processes that I've had is when I've been able to do that.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. So, to me, I think that if you can consistently, at each step of the sales process, do those things, you're halfway there. Right? But even the best sales processes, unless there is a true trigger event, need some sort of urgency at the end. The why now? Like you may slam dunk the why ADP,
Right. and
they're sold. But it's week 3 of April, and
Is it? I don't remember.
and we need to close an $11,000, $12,000, $14,000 to hit plan, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So then it becomes, okay, now I'm going to take all these opportunities that I've pitched that they're excited about the why ADP. Now I have to come up with a why now.
Right now.
So what have you seen other DMs say or do as best practices to get the why now?
I guess I don't have a specific example, but I was thinking about our conversations from earlier today, and I think that this challenger piece is going to be good, just kind of walking through step by step like what we did today, because you can hear that a million times, but until you translate that into what might be real life, so just the fiscal cliff, you can go out there and ask a million times, so how did the fiscal cliff impact your company? Well, I'm going to come out and tell you how the fiscal cliff probably impacted your company, and here's what I'm hearing from other companies, and an $8 an hour employee actually got a 6% cut in their pay based upon what happened with the fiscal cliff and the tax credits coming back off. So I think what it is, and I kind of lost my train of thought, but I think what it is just coming back and telling them the why now, because what they're not seeing is a true, I don't want to say cost impact, but cost impact beyond maybe dollars or time. The emotional piece of the impact. And again, when I've had my most successful sales processes, what if Martha gets hit by a bus, God forbid, and all of this knowledge goes out, nobody can replace that. What if, let's see here, let me give an example of Hanson, and, what if the information is not able to come and it's not, there's always been a profound emotional reason. What if we don't give you this HRB tool and your HR person still has to come in at 11 o'clock at night after her son goes to bed to finish her work because she can't get it all done during the day?
Kind of like the DirecTV commercials or the Wendy
kind
commercial.
Of like exactly, yeah.
You're going to be homeless because you ate an expensive looking sandwich for lunch,
yeah,
right?
What if you go to jail because you didn't be complying with the AC stuff? So yeah.
So you feel that if you emotionally drown them, like we talked
because
about,
then you can come right back and so I think that tying that together with a why now, because you can't always close in a promo. People are going to be like, if they're going to offer me this now, they're going to offer me,
So let's say you've emotionally drowned them, and they're like, yes, we're going to do this, but...
And that's the question that I guess I don't know that I have an answer to.
Okay, but they say, but I'm going on vacation, and I'm going to be gone for 2 weeks, so how about I sign May 1st?
Right.
Does that work for you? No, my month ends on April 25th. That's not going to work.
It's not going to work. I'm sorry.
So have you heard any best practices in that situation, or and that's pretty drastic, right? But we have a ton of those stories right now.
Mm-hmm.
I just was out on a call yesterday with Tammy. Yeah, you know what? We'll go talk to the owner of the company, and I'm sure we can have a decision in the next week or two. Right, so how do you create urgency when you need it for this month without sounding desperate?
And again, I don't honestly know that I have seen anybody put that particular. That's an objection.
Mm-hmm.
So I've never seen, at least not recently, have I seen a good example to be able to call into mind. When it's been successful for me, it's because all of the right people work right through the decision-making process, and in that last meeting. So I'm just, I guess I don't have a solid answer for
Do
you.
you typically, when you're giving your feedback and you're demoing the solution and you're proposing your recommendation, do you typically have a piece in there about next steps?
So if walking backwards, so definitely walking backwards, so for example, something that I have used recently, which I'm not sure that I'm not sure what the consequences of it have been yet. But something I've used recently is that, the ACA recording stuff is going to really, for your purposes, should probably start in July. Because if you're looking back at a period, you have your 6 month, and then you can start your benchmarking for moving forward for what your timeline should be.
Mm-hmm.
So you have either 3 months or you have your 6 months, and this would give you your best option for looking back over that period and start to put some benchmarks in place. So if we're backing into that July 1 start date, then we're doing 6 to 8 weeks starting from now.
So what I'm hearing you say is if it's the week before and I haven't done anything to establish a reason
Right.
for assigning data,
Right.
the last week of April, it's going to be tough with 1 week. I'm gonna have to probably use something like a promo and be transparent.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And that's a huge risk, because then it's like, well, if they're going to throw a promo at me this month,
Right. Right.
you lose credibility. Last minute, if I can get you a month free, can you sign by next week? There are instances that works.
Few and
Right.
far between, yes.
Right, but it calls for complete transparency, and it's got to be with somebody who gets it. They're a financial person. They get.
Or somebody who said, yeah, we're going to make this decision. We just, we need to. We've already. Or that's not what I'm going to say. Give you a verbal.
Yeah.
And they're just, holding
Ping-ponging
that.
around, setting the
Yeah.
appointment for you to come. Oh, I can't meet that day. We've got
Right.
this going on, or we're going to be in
Right.
meetings, and yeah.
Right.
So those are situations that you can say, in complete transparency, would this help? And I think even sometimes if, a few weeks ahead of time, just saying, I know that they're coming out with this promotion, here's why right now. It helps ADP to get as much business on the books and implementation started now before the rush comes in. Like, we're trying to forecast and try to even out our workload on our implementation specialists.
Exactly, because many people will do either at the beginning of the year or middle of the year.
Yeah. So to incentivize people to maybe make that decision a few weeks earlier so that we can spread out the workload, we're providing promotions. If I can get you a promotion, does it even make sense to share with you what those are? Are you in a position to make a decision? Now, that's a conversation you can have April 1 for an April 25 signature, right?
Right.
You can't have that conversation on April 20th
Right.
and expect success.
Right.
So I think that creating the now, as you mentioned, is a lot in your messaging and how you provide the recommendation and drive that urgency based on how it's going to impact their business. Because every day that they wait is just one more day that it's negatively impacting their business. But it's also in the timing of of leveraging promos. It's how you message the promo and why we're providing this promotion. So, it could even be something to the extent of this time of the year, ADP extends promotions for these reasons. And I would be remiss if I didn't share those with you, but at the same token, if it's not even a possibility for you to make a decision,
Right.
obviously it doesn't make sense, but I would be remiss to not share those
Right.
with you.
Because they're great promotions.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think that there are ways that you can do that maybe 3 or 4 weeks before you want the signature,
Right.
but you have to be strategic about that as well.
Okay. So that's about timing.
Timing of promotions.
Mm-hmm. It's not the last minute.
Yeah.
That's,
So if I were to just kind of put a big bow on this, well, let me before I do that, let me answer the question. So, what's the consequence if you don't figure this out? Like in your mind, like in your mind, if I
continued
don't.
frustration, honestly. Continued frustration and anger because I have gotten them to a point where they believe that I'm telling the truth. They buy absolutely into what I'm saying. And they agree that ADP is the right decision. But then I just sit and watch them tick the clock away. And it's like,
What happens when that time, every day that goes by, what happens?
they get further away from the situation and they forget.
And so the likelihood of closing it
Would
decreases, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it has a monetary impact on you.
Mm-hmm.
It has an emotional and mental impact on you because you're on that hamster wheel again, right?
Right.
So I think what I heard you come to the conclusion of through all this is that the why ADP and the why ADP now starts at the very beginning of the sales process.
Yep.
It's determining the criteria
Mm-hmm.
in the first meeting.
Mm-hmm.
It's coming up with the why during the analysis and validating,
Right.
again, the criteria.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the feedback and the demo, it's in not just stopping at this is how it's going to solve the problem that we uncovered, it's this is what this means to your organization and emotionally drowning them
Right.
if they don't address it. If you do those things well throughout the sales process, then that innately is going to create a tremendous amount of urgency. It's not just going to answer the why ADP, it's going to answer the why now.
Mm-hmm.
But we know that doesn't always do it. We've built some of the best business cases and they still have stalled,
Mm-hmm.
right? So even if you do all those things well, there still is an opportunity to leverage promotions to create urgency.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not about throwing it at them with 5 days left in the month. It's about
Right.
establishing them early on.
Right.
Anything else that you can think of that might help resolve this stalled deal dilemma?
I feel like that's all. I don't know. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a lot of stuff.
It
I mean,
is a lot of
it's,
stuff.
It's a little bit, but it's a lot of stuff. And so I go through all these processes, but I just think that that's been the one thing that doesn't always get pulled to the forefront.
So what are you going to do differently? I mean, so it's like
Continuous to what I've been doing as far as like putting, writing out a plan of action card going to every appointment. So here's my opening statement. I'm going to, if, it's going to sound very simplistic, but if it is just stated in there, what my if-then questions
Yeah.
will be, then I will be able to, it's going to trigger me
Yep.
to go back and make those same comments.
it's your reminder.
Yep.
So preparation and
Yep.
preparing before
Mhm.
each step of the sales process. And identifying the right questioning, the right messaging.
And then that gives me stuff to go back with in the analysis, and then start,
Yeah, 'cause
and
you could
just
forget.
bring them up every single time. Yeah. So.
And you could forget. So even selling in between events, if you forget to ask, you
Right.
could pick up the phone. It gives you a great reason to touch base with them again. I forgot to ask when I was on.
Right, or sending them something, then once you answer that question, sending them something to validate that. I
Yep.
think that what I would say, if I could give an example, I think Tammy's pretty spectacular at this part,
Mhm.
giving a lot of necessary information and finding out, getting the urgency around making, at least my, outsider's perspective. I've actually never been on a call with her. Believe it or not, maybe that's a.
There you go. So maybe that's another point of accountability. I'm going to prepare differently for my appointments now to include, make sure I have, something prepared to so that I do these things, but observing somebody else who's really successful
Yeah.
at creating urgency, I think is a phenomenal idea.
Yeah. So I will definitely put that down as one of my
And
targets.
even if you can't, which, I mean, Tammy, that's easy, right? She's local in the area, she
Right.
covers part of your, I mean, it would be easy to get involved in a field ride with her. But Eve, is there anyone in Indianapolis that you think is particularly good at this, that you could even pick up the phone and pick their brain?
I would imagine that Ann Bowden is pretty good at it too.
Mhm.
So yeah, Tammy will be probably up in the area from time to time, so
Yeah.
maybe I could just tag on with her
That'd be,
on one of those.
she'd be more than happy.
Yeah, I think she would too.
So, calling Ann, right along with Tammy,
Right.
and preparing differently. How about as you're preparing, let's make a point of, once you've prepared that, of talking about it,
Mm-hmm.
and then getting together afterwards and saying, okay, how did it go?
Right.
And
Yeah.
talking through that.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I think that being able to talk through what that's going to be, and
Do you think Chris's deal coaching?
I've looked at that from time to time, and I think that would be probably, yeah, that's a good idea.
I think the value in that is after the call, it'll help you pinpoint maybe some questions that you
Well, I was
didn't ask.
thinking as I'm writing things down in the EO is just, whatever those are, and then going back, looking at the notes afterwards, which I do anyway, but I've never actually taken out the themes from the first call. So I think that will help me remember, what are going to be most impact to.
Yep, because that's what you're going to tie back to. And
So if I pull out 2 or 3 themes from every, if there's more, but 2 or 3 themes from every first call, I can really go back and know what to hammer home.
Yeah.
Where they cringed, where they, so yeah. And honestly, it goes back to preparedness. It's getting in the door. You can go in and think that you're going to win because someone likes you.
yeah,
But it really is going to be.
and that
hard,
helps, right?
well, yeah. I mean, but I have plenty of people who like me. It's this part that I'm challenged by, and kind of the longer I stay in this cycle, the more frustrated I get. So it just kind of perpetuates. Yeah. So, but it's been fun. These last couple of weeks, just going on a couple of calls with Kim, and being able to kind of have that that back and forthness. And I'll come at it from a different angle, and then I'll come to the same conclusion at the back end. But
That's awesome.
yeah, so that's been fun to
fantastic.
watch. But we've and watch that happen and evolve. But I think that I'm gonna, for me, because I have gone on calls alone, things from first call. So I will
Good.
definitely put those into place.
So next week during our one-on-one, I'll just follow up with you on any progress that you made on talking with Ann, scheduling some time with Tammy.
Mm-hmm.
And then what EOs do you have next week?
This is next week. TH Plastics, which is a LAR.
Good. So let's
And actually,
specifically strategize, or like when you prepare, let's specifically talk about that before you go out on what you've prepared,
Okay.
and then afterwards let's debrief
Okay.
on, were you able to pull out the information that you needed,
Okay.
like the themes and the trends and the decision-making criteria.
Sure. Okay. Cool. We can do that.
Awesome.
We can do that.
Anything else?
Yeah. That was good. That was fun. Thank you. Totally forgot all about that fun.